Thanks. Well, I just rushed over to speak because I wasn't planning as such to speak. Because Gino is our spokesperson on this, but I received an email this week and I realised it connects to the issues at stake in this bill, and I've heard them referred to in some of the previous contributions, and that's the Justice for the Wards group, and I met them recently outside the Dáil. But in fact, I had meetings with minister. I can't even remember what minister it was about in the previous government, because it is a complicated area, the Wards of Court. But that meeting, with whichever minister it was, quite a number of years ago, was prompted by two people I know in my area who were in the ward system. Well, a young woman who was in the ward system and her guardian, and their particular concern, and this is echoed then in the protest, I think, that was outside the Dáil, and in the email I got, was about the lack of proper oversight of the wardship funds, or the wards funds, whatever the right terminology is, and the fact that there had been commitments for a number of years for the Controller and Auditor General to oversee how those funds were being managed, but that never actually happened. There were commitments at meetings, committee meetings, and I think Taoiseach at various times this was going to be done, but it never happened. And this, my first engagement with it was in the aftermath of the financial crash, where there were significant losses, I think, made in some of these funds. And the point that the Justice for Wards group make, and friends of mine who first sort of drew my attention to this, was that they were completely in the dark about this, that the wards had no real say. They had no real say in any of this, that decisions were being taken above their heads by somebody called, the Register of the Office of Wards of Court, and that these decisions were essentially taken over their heads without any proper consultation. And I hear that they are also concerned that they haven't been properly consulted in all this. I don't know the extent to which this bill impacts on any of that. As we're doing away with the ward system, I understand that that's what's happening. So what happens with those funds and the properties that are supposed to be managed? How does all that work? But what I would say, with my limited understanding, is that those people who emailed me and my friends were very, very unhappy with their experience. Very unhappy. Okay, and really felt they were ignored, they were yesed, plumosed, things were going to happen, nothing ever happened, and they were always on the outside. In fact, my friends exited the ward system because they were so frustrated and angry at the whole situation. And the email I'm getting, it concludes by saying it's unconscionable that the state would abandon these vulnerable people for whom they have responsibility, and that elderly parents would have to take to the streets to be heard. And they talk about people in this situation struggling on disability allowance with insufficient for their needs and are dependent on elderly parents for financial support, in danger of losing their homes and going into residential care, right? So these are vulnerable people in very, very difficult circumstances who feel really abandoned. And they conclude that email by asking for engagement with the Minister, right? So I would appeal that the Minister would respond to the Justice for Wards group. They know how to present their case far better than I do, but I'm absolutely clear from my conversation with them and from the emails they sent and from my previous discussions with my friends out in Dún Laoghaire who've experienced all this, that there are big issues to be addressed. And insofar as that may then impact on this legislation, I'm also aware that Justice for Ward's group feel they should be better consulted on this legislation more generally. And then there's the point that has already been made, but just to reiterate it, the concerns of mental health reform, that those people who, under the Mental Health Act, have been incarcerated, that they are excluded from this legislation, and that the rights, because this legislation does appear to be doing the right thing in terms of trying to assist people to make their own decisions. That's important. I like the idea of the DSS, the Decision Support Service. That seems like a good idea. Indeed, I had people into my clinic in the last few weeks who are having extraordinary difficulty because their loved one and family member had fairly advanced Alzheimer's. They hadn't got, what's that thing you're supposed to get? Yes, they hadn't got enduring power of attorney set up, and they have had to go through some rigmarole. And I tell you, I found it hard. The people in my office found it hard to get answers as to what do you have to do and the hoops you have to jump through in order to then deal with that situation. And we were phoning all sorts of people, and they've been at it for months. In fact, following this debate, I better check in and see where that's at, but it was a pretty complicated, convoluted and difficult process. So I hope that this is actually going to help people in this situation. But again, the fact that quite a lot of the advocacy groups representing those with disabilities are concerned that this is rushed, that they have not been properly consulted, is a big concern. Because we're going to get things wrong if we're not listening to the people, and especially in the area of disability. It's, you can't really know all the difficulties, the pitfalls, the problems, the inadequacies, unless you're really listening to the people who have to live this. And if they are expressing the view that they have not been properly consulted on this legislation and that it is being rushed, I really believe the government need to listen to that. Because it is better to get it right than rush it through. We can't have a situation where, as is being suggested, that a particular cohort of people may be completely excluded from the sort of support provisions that this bill is supposed to be enacting, and the rights and the UN CRPD, most of all the provisions of the UN CRPD. That would obviously, I hope, not what the government would intend. So those concerns need to be addressed. So yeah, that's all I have to say. I hope the ministers are listening to those, and I am really just acting as a conduit to the experience and concerns that are expressed by others. But I think you've heard it from quite a few deputies in here, and I sincerely hope the ministers will listen to those concerns.